After Hackman's death, a month later, a secret door was found behind a bookshelf that led down to a huge, undocumented basement. There were black and white photos from hundreds of years ago, top secret documents, and machines that don't make sense scientifically. The basement was completely cut off from the rest of the world, and the FBI came in and took everything, but no one dared say a word about what they found. Curious reporters disappeared from the media, and videos of the event were scrubbed clean. Hollywood stayed eerily quiet, so what did Hackman know? Was he just a famous actor, or was he hiding a secret that no one was ever supposed to find out? Is this just a theory, or is there a truth that will never be found? On a dreary morning, FBI cars were parked quietly outside Gene Hackman's home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The air felt stifling, like not even the wind could move inside the sprawling estate. More than a month after Hackman's departure, the house was almost completely empty, except for a hidden door behind a bookshelf. Nobody knew there was a passageway until Special Agent Michael Reynolds pushed the bookshelf aside and an unexpected void appeared. At first, everyone thought it was just a private storage space Hackman used for awards, personal mementos, or sentimental items. But when flashlight beams broke through the darkness, everyone fell silent as they saw a corridor intricately carved from stone that went deep into the ground. "This isn't just a secret room, this is a passageway, a tunnel," Reynolds whispered, his eyes fixed on the dusty walls. The tunnel under Gene Hackman's library was too perfect to have been made by accident. The stones that made up the walls were perfectly aligned and had strange symbols carved into them that no one could immediately figure out. There was a thick layer of dust on the floor, which suggested that no one had been here in years, or at least no one had come back from it. The investigation team followed the corridor, their flashlight beams bouncing off the cold walls. Hackman hadn't built it, he just found it and decided to keep it secret. At the end of the hallway stood a huge iron door with no handle and only a narrow slot for a special key or an unknown mechanism that the team still couldn't figure out. When an agent lightly pressed against its rusted surface, a low, hollow sound echoed through the dark space as the door slowly creaked open. Beyond the iron barrier lay a huge room with tall shelves. A dusty desk in the middle of the room was full of documents and strange artifacts. It was littered with sketches and faded black and white photos. "My God, this is something else," an agent whispered, his voice shaking with shock. In the basement corner, strange mechanical parts were lying around, some rusted and others amazingly clean. They didn't look like anything made in the 20th or 21st centuries. Were they ancient collectibles or pieces of something that was never revealed to the world? An agent looked through the papers on the desk. There were yellowed sheets with detailed mechanical drawings, construction blueprints, and scrolled notes in Hackman's usual handwriting. There were also maps with no recognizable locations marked only by cryptic symbols and arrows connecting undefined points. Hackman had discovered underground in a wooden box next to the desk dozens of carefully arranged black and white photos. Some looked old, maybe from the last century, and showed buildings that had been torn down. Others were portraits of unknown people. Reynolds looked at each one until he stopped on one of Gene Hackman, standing in front of the iron door they had just gone through. The photo had a timestamp, but what shocked them was that it was from over 50 years ago when Hackman was a young actor, long before he became famous. "That's impossible, he couldn't have known about this place back then," Reynolds said, even though the evidence showed Hackman had been here long before he owned the house. House now theories started to change. Hackman wasn't the first person to enter this tunnel, so who built it? Were the strange symbols on the walls connected to an ancient civilization, or was this all part of a bigger plan? The scariest thing was the feeling that this place hadn't been forgotten. Dust might cover the artifacts, but the air had an unmistakable presence that the team couldn't explain with normal science. "We need to call in the experts," Reynolds said. As they got ready to leave, another agent looked up at the weathered wooden beams on the basement ceiling and saw a handwritten message that said, "Don't go any further. It's still here." No one on the team knew what it meant, but they did know that the hidden door behind the bookshelf was just the start of a much bigger mystery. The air in the basement got heavy as flashlight beams swept across the cold stone walls, and strange symbols stretched from floor to ceiling like a curse that had been buried by time. They weren't written in Latin, Greek, ancient Egyptian, or any other known script. "It's not just random carvings. This is a language," FBI agent Michael Reynolds said gravely, running his fingers along the deeply etched marks. "But if it was a language, who wrote it? And more importantly, what were they trying to say? The presence of these ancient writings made the FBI decide right away that they needed experts, archaeologists and linguists from Harvard and the Smithsonian. The experts came back the next day with laser scanners, high-resolution cameras, and cutting-edge software for analyzing ancient scripts. But after hours of study, they found out the shocking truth. No one could decipher this language. This doesn't match any known scripts in human history, said Professor Alan Carter, a famous linguist. It's like it was never meant to be understood. The experts compared the symbols to every known writing system, from Sumerian and Babylonian to Mayan, and even the untranslated Rongorongo of Easter Island. The results were the same, no matches. This raised a bigger question. Was this a language made by humans, or something beyond our understanding? While linguists struggled with the unreadable symbols, an agent found a map hidden among Hackman's old papers. It wasn't a normal map. It didn't have the names of countries, cities, or landmarks. Instead, it had points marked with symbols that were the same as those on the basement walls. There was a strange, straight line connecting some places that looked like it was leading to a certain place. Agent Reynolds laid the map on the table and looked at it carefully, asking, "Is this a treasure map?" Someone whispered, but no one answered. When the team looked more closely, they saw a faint signature in the corner of the map. It was written in faded ink, but they could still make out the name Gene Hackman. Hackman not only owned this map, he had marked it, which disproved the idea that he had just found the basement by accident. He knew about this place, studied it, and most importantly, he was looking for something. But it wasn't the only map. Flipping through another stack of papers, the team found 2 more copies of the same chart, each with different markings that made it look like Hackman had spent years perfecting it. This brought up a disturbing question. If the map was the key to another mystery, why hadn't Hackman shared his findings? Had he found something scarier than he thought? This brought up another question. If Hackman wasn't the first person to find this basement, the original map was drawn by someone else. More importantly, were they still out there? The team followed the dimly lit corridor that led from Gene Hackman's basement. The damp, cold stone walls and still air made it seem like no one had been here in decades. But this wasn't just a basement. Footsteps echoed in the empty space, reflecting off of ancient stone. This corridor wasn't the end. It led to a huge network of tunnels, went deeper than what the eye could see. "This isn't just a basement, this is something much bigger," an uneasy agent said. Then the question hit everyone. Why weren't these tunnels shown on any official map? Hollywood has always been a place full of mysteries and rumors about famous stars, behind-the-scenes secrets, and mysterious disappearances that all seem to be linked. But who would have thought that beneath this glamorous world lay an undocumented tunnel system? Los Angeles's modern topographic maps didn't show such a network, but history gave them a clue. During Prohibition, gangs used an underground tunnel system to hide goods and avoid being caught. But what they were looking at wasn't a crumbling relic of a bootlegger's hideout. It was bigger, deeper, and older. An archaeologist on the team touched the stone wall, his voice shaking. "This architecture is not from the 20th century. This is much older. If this system existed before Hollywood became a film capital, who..." No one knew when Gene Hackman found these tunnels, but he knew they were there because personal notes found in the basement showed he had tried to map out the network, though he hadn't fully explored it. What's scarier is that his notes hinted at more entrances spread out across Hollywood, in old basements under film studios, drainage pipes that led to hidden zones, and the homes of movie stars with secret passages. No one knew how many people in the entertainment industry knew about this secret, or did they? There have been rumors for a long time that there were secret societies pulling Hollywood strings from the shadows, strange rituals, and strange connections between the film world and buried historical mysteries. When they saw this tunnel system, those rumors didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. There was just one simple but chilling question. If Gene Hackman wasn't the first person to find this network, who really controlled it? As the team dug deeper, they found something scarier than the tunnels themselves. At the end of one branch stood a huge iron door that was securely locked. A marking on the wall, a military symbol, left them speechless. "This isn't just a Hollywood secret anymore," an agent said, his voice catching it. "This isn't just a Hollywood secret anymore." Theories of Dumb's deep underground military bases have long interested people looking for the truth. Rumors say the U.S. government keeps a network of hidden bases for classified experiments and unrevealed projects. Examples include Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado and Dulce Base in New Mexico. Could what Gene Hackman found not only be an old tunnel system, but also a way into a darker secret that the government didn't want the public to know? The team stood frozen in front of the iron door, no one daring to approach because they'd found too much in too little time, which brought them to a terrifying realization. What they knew might only be the tip of a huge submerged iceberg. The air in the basement became more oppressive than ever as flashlights swept over dusty stacks of neatly arranged papers. The FBI had taken important documents, but their contents were still secret. Why did Gene Hackman have these files? Hackman was a veteran actor and a cinematic legend, and no one thought he had any connections to government secrets. But what the team found painted a very different picture. On an old wooden table, a file marked Top Secret lay open, as if someone had quickly skimmed it before running away. The seal on its corner belonged to the National Security Agency, NSA. A secret agent whispered, "He was never supposed to have this." Hackman might write movie scripts or novel drafts, but these were intelligence reports, military records, and references to secret projects. They talked about unpublished experiments, tests of unrecorded technology, and important people with ties to the government who weren't in public records. Most importantly, Gene Hackman didn't just own them, he'd studied them. This made people wonder if Gene Hackman had ever worked for the government. As a talented actor with a long and successful career, but among the files were letters he'd sent to powerful people that he had never publicly acknowledged. There was also a letter with the Department of Defense seal, a report signed by a former CIA director, and documents about Cold War intelligence operations. Why did Hackman have these? In a separate box, agents found a stack of handwritten letters, some of which were yellowed from age. The names on them were politicians, military leaders, and even people no one had heard of. But one letter stood out. It stood out from the others because the words were scrawled quickly but clearly. Gene, whatever you do, keep these documents safe. If they find out you have them, it will be too late. Who wrote this? Why did they warn Hackman? What did they fear? Since Hackman's death, the FBI quickly took most of the basement's contents and released only a few, mostly unimportant notes. However, the most important documents were never released. Reports on military projects, files related to the secret tunnels under Hollywood, and details about powerful people behind the scenes have all disappeared, leaving people to wonder what they were hiding. Hackman may have found a secret too big to reveal, one that could change how people think about Hollywood, the government, and even modern history. He may not have been a spy, but he knew more than any normal actor should have. He may not have been an insider, but what he left behind showed he'd gone too far in his search for the truth, which is maybe why the FBI moved so quickly to find him. There were black and white photos from 100 years ago of something completely alien sitting in Gene Hackman's basement. It was a machine that shouldn't exist, and no one knew where it came from, who made it, or what it was for. But as flashlight beams reflected off its strange metallic surface, every FBI agent there that day knew they had found something from another world. At first glance, it looked like an old device put together from different parts, some of which looked very modern, and others from the early 20th century. What shocked them the most were the parts. "What in the world is this?" an agent asked as they touched the cold metal shell that showed no signs of rust or decay, as if time couldn't hurt it. Engineers were called right away, and when the top engineers and physicists arrived in the basement, they were dumbfounded. "This shouldn't exist. Not now, not like this," one scientist whispered. The machine was both too old and too new. It didn't belong to any era. Its surface had engravings of the same strange symbols found on the basement walls, suggested a complex mechanism, but no one could figure out how it worked. What was even scarier was that it was still working, while experts looked at it and came to the horrifying conclusion that its design didn't match any technology from the 20th or 21st centuries. Theories began to form about a secret scientific experiment, an unannounced invention possibly from a classified military project, and why it was in an actor's basement. It was thought to be a relic of a lost civilization, not an alien one, but a human culture that had been forgotten by history. The idea of a time travel device was crazy, but the strange details that couldn't be explained made it seem less crazy. The evidence only added to the mystery. A scientist pulled a lever on the frame of the machine and a strange sound came out. The metal moved, and a section of the machine opened. Inside was a film reel which was shown in the dim light of the basement. The FBI carefully removed the reel and put it in a protective case. The markings on the container didn't match any known language. When the reel was restored and shown in a lab, what they saw left everyone speechless. The first image was a city that didn't exist. Towering buildings with unknown architecture, streets filled with light from electric lamps and other artificial sources, and people dressed in strange clothes walking between the huge structures were the scariest parts. This wasn't a sci-fi movie, it was real. Who filmed it, and what did it show? Hackman wasn't a scientist or an engineer, but he had clearly hidden this machine. Had Hackman found something horrifying that no one was supposed to know? The FBI quickly took the machine away. Public information was kept secret, but questions remained. Where did this machine come from? Who built it? And most importantly, what could it do? If it was cutting-edge technology, why was it hidden in a dark basement below Gene Hackman's house? What if it was still working? In the dim light of the secret basement, the FBI sifted through dusty shelves full of old documents, strange maps, and a machine that didn't seem to work. Something else sent chills down their spines, a set of hand-drawn paintings that weren't the Gene Hackman painted them himself. It's strange that no one knew Hackman was an artist because he never showed any work in public or talked about painting in interviews. But as the FBI put together each piece, they realized these weren't just random sketches. They were a message that Hackman had written in his last years. There was one painting in particular that made everyone stop and hold their breath. As agents looked at the paintings, a pattern began to emerge. The mysterious symbols from the basement walls kept showing up, not once, but obsessively and precisely scribbled, as if Hackman was haunted by them. One painting showed a huge door etched with mysterious symbols, and in front of it stood a group of faceless figures. Another showed a hand reaching out of the darkness and grasping a glowing orb. At the bottom, a faint, almost erased writing read, "It was never meant to be found." Another painting showed an endless tunnel with strange carvings on the walls. When compared to real life, the FBI realized it matched the tunnels they had just explored under Hollywood. But the most terrifying painting, the one that made them shiver, was of a man wearing a mask. This painting stood out because it didn't have any symbols or cryptic marks. It just showed a man standing still in front of a locked, tall door. The mask's design went against known styles, looking like both a theatrical relic and an ancient artifact from a long-gone civilization. But the real terror wasn't the hidden face. Hackman painted the eyes of the figure as if he had seen it in real life. The gaze from the painting seemed to follow anyone who looked at it for too long. No one knew who this man was or where Hackman had met him. But what made it even scarier was that Hackman hadn't painted on paper or canvas, but on an old wooden plank. When they turned it over, they saw a message carved by his hand that said, "He is waiting." The FBI sent the paintings right away to be analyzed under ultraviolet light. Light, invisible ink, showed up on some pieces, matching the symbols on the basement walls. This confirmed what Hackman already knew. He knew about the basement, the symbols, and what was hidden beneath Hollywood. But why was he so obsessed with painting them? Why had he never shown these works to the public before? After days of research, a theory formed. Hackman wasn't just making art, he was recording what he knew. The huge door in the paintings might be real, somewhere underground, locked. Some people thought Hackman left these as a warning about what the strange machine found in the basement, the symbols that couldn't be read, or a secret he had found but couldn't tell in time. The FBI was the only one who knew for sure that Hackman painted them in his last years, and maybe he knew that someone would eventually find them. News of Gene Hackman's secret basement used to flood headlines, forums, and conspiracy sites. Within weeks, there were no more shocking stories about tunnels under Hollywood, no more arguments about cryptic symbols or the masked man in Hackman's paintings, and the whole thing was forgotten, as if it had never happened. People who were following the story noticed something strange. Analysis videos on YouTube started going away one by one, and posts on Reddit, Twitter, and other sites talking about the basement were taken down without any explanation. News outlets that had extensively covered the story, the FBI didn't say anything about the scandal. Reporters who tried to get in touch with agents involved in the discovery didn't hear back. What's even scarier is that some reporters who were following the case just disappeared. Usually a celebrity scandal would spark months or years of debate, but this time, Hollywood was completely quiet. No one in the industry talked about Hackman after the investigation. Friends, co-workers, and family who knew him and had worked with him on big projects avoided every question. Some reporters tried to talk to people involved, but got cold responses like, "I don't know what you're talking about." One of Hackman's best friends, a director from the 1990s, sold all of his assets and left the US days after the investigation ended, and no one knew why. Around the same time, researchers hired by the FBI to figure out what the symbols meant stopped posting on social media and couldn't be reached. Independent bloggers and documentary filmmakers tried to find out what happened but were unsuccessful. They quickly realized someone was watching them. A famous YouTuber known for conspiracy videos posted an hour-long breakdown of the Hackman basement. Within 24 hours, his whole channel and all of his videos were deleted, and when he tried to start a new one, it was immediately disabled. Another famous blogger wrote an in-depth analysis of Hackman's paintings on his website. A few days later, his site was hacked, all of his data was erased, and he got an email with the subject line, "Stop digging." This led many people to believe authorities were in charge of the story. But what were they hiding? While most online references to Hackman's basement were erased, a small dark web group said they downloaded photos from the basement before the FBI locked it up, according to their leaks. One document stood out. It was kept in a locked metal box with a mechanism that only Hackman could unlock it. Inside were dozens of handwritten pages that were scribbled in a panicked way. One passage scared readers to death. Hackman saw something he wasn't supposed to see. The door, the tunnels, the symbols, and him. He is real, and he is watching. The bigger question was, who was he? Eventually, no one talked about Hackman's basement anymore. Those who were interested gave up or were forced to. The FBI stayed quiet, and Hollywood went on as if nothing had happened. Hackman's creepy paintings were never shown to the public. Their fate is still unknown. And the tunnels below? Hollywood. They still exist, but no one is brave enough to go any further. The masked guy from Hackman's last painting waits in the shadows for someone brave enough to open the last door.